It was 1:43 a.m. when Ethan Carter ran down the concrete stairs into the Chicago subway station. Cold air rushed through the tunnels, carrying the metallic smell of steel and dust. Above ground, the city was still awake, but down here everything felt different. Quiet, almost abandoned. Ethan checked his phone. 1:43 a.m. He sighed. He had just missed the earlier train, which meant only one thing: the last train of the night. The platform was nearly empty. A few flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above him. Their pale glow reflected across the worn tiles and steel rails. Ethan looked around. No crowds, no music, no late-night commuters rushing home. Just silence. Then he heard it. A distant rumble echoing through the tunnel. The train. A moment later, two bright headlights appeared in the darkness, while the train rolled into the station with a long metallic screech. The doors slid open. Ethan stepped inside. The car was almost empty. Only 4 other passengers sat scattered across the seats. A tired businessman rubbing his eyes, an old woman clutching a small purse, a college kid wearing headphones and staring at his phone, and a man in a long black coat sitting near the far end of the car. The man's head was slightly lowered, his face hidden in shadow. Ethan sat down near the middle of the train and exhaled. Finally, he muttered quietly. The doors closed with a soft chime. The train began moving. At first, everything felt normal. The train rattled through the dark tunnels while the overhead lights flickered slightly with each turn. A robotic voice spoke over the speaker. "Our next stop, Clark and Lake." The train slowed. The doors opened. The businessman stood up, adjusted his coat, and stepped off onto the platform. The doors closed. The train continued forward. Ethan leaned back in his seat. 4 passengers left. Then the train stopped again. The old woman slowly stood up and shuffled toward the door. Before stepping out, she glanced briefly toward Ethan. For a second, her expression looked uneasy. Then she disappeared onto the platform. Now only 3 people remained: Ethan, the college kid, and the man in the black coat. The train kept moving deeper into the tunnels. The lights flickered once, then again. Ethan glanced toward the subway map above the doors. Something felt strange. The station names didn't look familiar anymore. The next stop was announced, but Ethan had never heard of it before. He frowned. Maybe he just hadn't noticed it before. The train slowed again. The doors opened. The college student stood up, still wearing his headphones, and walked out without even looking up. The doors closed. Now only 2 passengers remained: Ethan and the man in the black coat. The man hadn't moved once, not even a little. He was still sitting exactly the same way, head lowered, hands resting on his knees. The train moved deeper into the tunnel, but now the tunnel outside the windows looked different. The walls looked older, the lights were dimmer, like this part of the subway system hadn't been used in years. Ethan shifted in his seat. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "This is weird." He looked toward the map again. The train was far past any station he recognized, and then the overhead speaker crackled. The sound was distorted. Static filled the car. Then a voice spoke, but it didn't sound like the normal automated announcement. It sounded slower, older, almost tired. Final stop. Ethan sat up straight. The train began slowing down. The brakes screeched as the train rolled toward a station. But when Ethan looked out the window, his stomach dropped. There was no platform. Instead, dim yellow lights revealed something else. Rows of old gravestones, stretching across a wide underground chamber. Cold mist drifted across the floor. The train came to a stop. The doors slowly slid open. The voice spoke again through the speaker. "Cemetery line." Ethan's heart began pounding. "That's not real," he whispered. "There's no station like that." The doors remained open, waiting. The cold mist from outside slowly drifted into the train car. Ethan slowly turned his head toward the man in the black coat. For the first time since the ride began, the man moved. He slowly lifted his head. His face was pale.
Ethan backed
almost
away
gray.
from the open doors.
His
so
eyes
quickly
locked
his
onto
shoulder
Ethan,
slammed
and he
into the
spoke
metal
softly.
pole near the seats.
This is where
His
everyone
pulse
gets
was
off.
pounding in his ears.
A pause.
The mist kept
Then he
drifting
finished
into
the
the train,
sentence.
low and slow,
Eventually,
curling around the floor like
the
it
train
had
lights
all the
flickered.
time in the world.
once,
He looked back out
Twice.
through the open doorway.
then the
Rows
entire
of
car went
gravestones
dark
stretched
for a
across
split
the
second.
underground chamber in
When
every
the
direction.
lights came back on,
Some were old and
the
broken.
man in the black coat
Some
was gone.
leaned at strange angles.
The seat where
Some
he had
looked
been
new.
sitting was empty.
That was the part
Ethan
that
jumped
unsettled
to his
him
feet.
most. This didn't
His
look like
breathing
some
became
forgotten
fast and
section of the
uneven.
subway. Hello,
It looked maintained.
he called out.
Occupied.
No answer.
As if people still came
The
here.
train was completely
Or
empty
worse,
now, except for
as
him.
if people still arrived
The
here.
open doors still faced the
The
graveyard
overhead
outside.
lights buzzed
In the
softly
mist
above
moved
him.
slowly through the train.
Then one of them flickered
and the
again.
loudspeaker crackled.
Ethan
One
grabbed his
final
phone
time.
from his pocket and checked.
Voice
for a second.
whispered,
"Last
Nothing.
passenger. No bars."
A pause.
Not
Then
even
the
a weak
final
connection.
words echoed through the empty
He
train.
opened his maps anyway.
Please exit. The blue location dot spun for a second, then disappeared. Come on, he whispered. His voice sounded too loud in the empty train car. He took another step back and nearly lost his balance as the train shifted slightly beneath him. That made him stop. The train wasn't dead. It was still running. The doors were open, but the train hadn't shut down. It was waiting. Waiting for him to step off. Ethan looked back toward the tunnel behind the train. Dark, completely black. No sign of the station he had boarded from. No lights, no map signs. Nothing familiar. Then the loudspeaker crackled again. Static burst overhead, followed by that same tired, distorted voice. Doors closing in 30 seconds. Ethan froze. 30 seconds. A cold wave passed through him. Or if the doors closed, where would the train take him? He looked toward the cemetery outside again, then back at the dark tunnel ahead. Neither felt safe. But standing in the train, while some impossible voice counted down the seconds, somehow felt worse. He moved cautiously toward the doorway and leaned just enough to look outside without stepping off. The air beyond the train was colder than the tunnel air. Sharp, wet, earthy. It smelled like fresh dirt and old stone. That was when he noticed something else. There were names on the gravestones nearest the train, names and dates, and every date was recent. Not recent like years ago, recent like last week, last month, yesterday. Ethan stared at the nearest stone, trying to steady his breathing. The name on it was unreadable from where he stood, but the date beneath it was clear enough. 3 days ago. He looked at another one. 2 weeks ago. Another. Yesterday. No, he whispered. The speaker crackled. 20 seconds. Then from somewhere out in the cemetery, he heard movement. A soft dragging sound through the mist. Ethan went still. He listened. There it was again. Not footsteps exactly. More like something moving slowly between the gravestones. He squinted into the haze. At first he saw nothing. Then shapes began to form. Figures, standing between the graves. Human silhouettes, barely visible in the yellow station light and drifting fog. They weren't walking. They were just there, still, watching the train. His mouth went dry. The tallest figure stood nearest to the platform edge, or whatever passed for a platform here. On another smaller shape was farther back, then another, and another, all half hidden in mist, all facing the open doors. The speaker crackled again. 10 seconds. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. He turned and looked down the empty car, half hoping someone else would appear, some normal commuter, some conductor, anyone. But the train was still empty, except for him. Then he noticed something on the window beside the doors. A reflection. At first he thought it was his own, but it was too tall, too close. He turned sharply. Nothing behind him. When he looked back at the glass, the reflection was gone. The speaker buzzed. 5. The figures outside seemed a little closer now. He hadn't seen them move, but they were closer. 4. Ethan stepped away from the door. 3. A shape appeared in the doorway's edge of vision, just beyond the mist. 2. And then he saw him. The man in the black coat, standing just outside the train, perfectly still,
as if he'd been there the whole time. His pale face was expressionless, his eyes fixed on Ethan. One. The doors began to slide shut. At the last second, the man in the black coat lifted one hand and placed it against the outside of the glass. The doors closed fully. The train lurched and began moving. Ethan stumbled backward into the aisle, staring out through the window as the cemetery started sliding past in darkness and mist. The man in the black coat did not move. He stayed where he was, one hand on the glass as the train pulled away from him, watching. Then the station disappeared into darkness. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, waiting for the lights to flicker again, waiting for that voice to come back. Instead, the train moved in complete silence for almost a full minute. No announcements, no stops, nothing. Then he noticed a folded piece of paper on the seat where the man in the black coat had been sitting. It definitely had not been there before. Ethan stared at it. His first instinct was not to touch it, but after everything that had happened, leaving it there somehow felt worse. He stepped closer. With trembling fingers, he picked it up and unfolded it. It was a transit ticket. Old, yellowed, thin like paper that had been folded and unfolded 100 times. At the top, in faded print, it said, "Last ride, southbound." Below that was a handwritten name, Ethan Carter. His blood went cold. And under his name, written in darker ink, were 5 words. "You missed your stop tonight." Ethan stared at the ticket so long his vision started to blur. His name was written clearly. Ethan Carter. There was no mistake. His hands began to shake as the train rattled deeper through the tunnel. "You missed your stop tonight." The words echoed in his mind. He looked back toward the doors. They were sealed shut. The windows showed nothing but black tunnel walls rushing past. The train was moving faster now, faster than before. Ethan folded the ticket slowly and slipped it into his jacket pocket without thinking. Then he rushed to the intercom panel near the door. He slammed the red emergency call button. Nothing happened. No operator. No response. Just static. He pressed it again. Still nothing. "Hello," he shouted toward the speaker. This isn't funny." His voice bounced off the empty train car and disappeared into the metallic echo of the tunnel. Then the lights flickered. Ethan froze. One light above him blinked twice. Then the entire train car dimmed slightly. The overhead speaker crackled again. The same distorted voice returned. Slow. Dry. Like it was speaking through old dust. "Passenger remaining." A pause. "Next stop approaching." Ethan felt his stomach twist. "No," he whispered. The train began slowing again. He rushed to the window and looked outside. The tunnel walls were changing. The concrete looked older now. Cracked, broken, water dripping down the sides. This part of the subway looked abandoned, like trains hadn't run through here in decades. The brakes screamed. The train slowed to a crawl. Then it stopped. Ethan looked out the window. The platform outside looked even worse than the cemetery station. Half the lights were broken. Old rusted signs hung from the ceiling. But the worst part, there was no station name anywhere. Just a faded symbol painted on the wall. A circle with a line through it. The doors opened slowly. Cold air rushed inside the train again, but this air felt different, heavier, damp, like the air inside a basement that had been sealed for years. Ethan stayed exactly where he was. He didn't move. The voice came again. "Final transfer point." A pause. Then the voice said something that made Ethan's chest tighten. "Passengers continuing forward." Another pause. "Will not return." Ethan slowly stepped backward away from the door. "No thanks," he muttered. I'm good." He turned toward the other end of the train. Maybe another car had people. Maybe there was a conductor. Maybe he could move to another section. He walked quickly through the door into the next car, but the next car looked exactly the same. Empty. Dark. Silent. And when he looked through the window toward the car behind him, His heart stopped. Someone was sitting in the seat he had just left. The man in the black coat. Back inside the train. Exactly where he had been before. His head slowly turned, and his pale eyes locked onto Ethan again. The train doors began to close. The train jerked forward once more, and this time, the man in the black coat slowly stood up.